The morning after London was found, yellow tape stretched across Riverdale Road like a warning. Reporters gathered, cameras zoomed in, and detectives quietly began piecing together the nightmare that had unfolded behind that apartment complex. The body showed no signs of a random attack. There were no valuables missing, no evidence of a break-in or robbery gone wrong. Whoever killed London had time and confidence. The medical examiner confirmed what everyone feared. London had been killed before being placed in the bin. The condition of the body suggested one thing: this was personal. Detectives traced her last known movements through her phone data and security footage. At 9:47 p.m., she was seen leaving a friend's house. By 10:15, her phone pinged near an address just 4 miles from where she'd later be found. And then silence. No more calls. No more texts. Just digital emptiness. It didn't take long for police to zero in on 2 people. Both were teenagers. Both knew London. And one of them, according to detectives, had a history of violence, masked behind charm. Within days, whispers spread across social media. Screenshots of conversations. Rumors of jealousy. Mentions of a party that night. Online, everyone had an opinion. But investigators had something stronger: evidence. A neighbor's security camera had captured movement near the dumpster around midnight. 2 figures. A car. Headlights flashing once, then vanishing. That footage became the key. Detectives went public, asking anyone who knew London's last hours to come forward. Tips poured in, most anonymous. But one stood out. A message that began with 7 chilling words. Check her friend's boyfriend. He knows everything. It was the break they needed. Before we move into the next part, where the suspects are questioned and the truth begins to unravel. If you believe stories like London's deserve to be heard, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this video. Every time you do, it helps keep her story alive and reminds the world that victims like London Thomas deserve justice, not silence. Because in the end, awareness is power, and silence only protects the guilty. Awareness is power, and silence only protects the guilty. Inside the Southfield Police Department, time seemed to slow. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the clock ticked softly, and behind a thin wall of one-way glass, 2 detectives watched a 17-year-old boy fidget in his chair. Across from him sat Detective Maria Reynolds, calm, focused, relentless. She'd seen countless interviews, but this one was different. She could feel it in her gut. This wasn't just another case. This was personal. The boy sitting in front of her was London Thomas's boyfriend, the last person to see her alive. His hoodie sleeves were pulled over his hands, his voice small. He insisted he had nothing to do with London's death. She left my house, he said softly. She said she needed space. I tried to call her after, but she didn't answer. Detective Reynolds leaned in slightly. Space from what? She asked. He hesitated, then whispered, we were fighting a lot. The words hung in the air, heavy, incomplete. Across the hallway, another team sat with his mother. A woman in her late 40s, arms crossed, eyes cold. She didn't ask for water, didn't cry, didn't blink much at all. When asked if she'd spoken to London that night, she said no. But her tone carried something unspoken, a quiet defiance. Back in the first room, Reynolds began laying out the evidence. A printout of text messages between London and her boyfriend. The last ones were full of tension. London saying she wanted to end things, that she couldn't take the manipulation anymore. Reynolds placed the messages on the table. He didn't look. Then came the surveillance stills, blurry, grainy, but damning. A silver sedan circling the block around midnight. The same make and model as his mother's car. Funny thing, Reynolds said quietly. Your mom said she was home all night. His legs started bouncing. His eyes darted to the corner of the room. She waited, let the silence do the work. Then she leaned forward, voice low and steady. London was 17. She trusted you, and she ended up in a dumpster. He blinked rapidly. She wasn't supposed to die, he murmured, almost to himself. That's when the second detective, Officer Hall, entered the room. He carried a folder, one filled with photographs from the scene. The dumpster, the parking lot, the evidence bags. He slid one photo across the table. London's bracelet, still intact, found near the bin. The boy froze. He reached for it instinctively, then stopped midway. His lips trembled. "Where'd you find that?" he asked. "Where you left her," Reynolds replied. For almost 30 seconds, he didn't speak. Then quietly the dam broke. He confessed. Not in a rush, not with tears, but in fragments. He said they argued that night. She told him she was leaving, for good this time. He said he lost control, that his mother helped clean up, that they thought no one would ever find out. But the story didn't end there, because when detectives moved back to the mother's room, she wasn't calm anymore. She'd been listening, and now, faced with her son's words, she snapped. "He's lying," she said sharply. "I didn't help him. I told him to go to the police. He's ruining both our lives." But Reynolds knew that tone. Not shock, not grief. It was survival. They showed her the phone records. Multiple calls between her and her son the night London vanished. They showed her the gas receipt timestamped an hour after London's phone went dark. And finally, they showed her the traffic camera footage. Her car, headlights on, driving past the dump site at 12:17 a.m. Her shoulders sagged. Her eyes dropped to the table. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "I didn't know what else to do," she whispered. "He called me. He said she was gone. I panicked." That word, gone, echoed through the room. Later, when prosecutors would replay those recordings in court, that moment would stand out. Because in that single sentence, she admitted what mattered most. She knew. She knew before the police ever did. After 12 hours of questioning, both mother and son were charged. He with murder, she with conspiracy and tampering. The official press conference came that evening. Reporters packed the Southfield precinct, microphones buzzing, cameras flashing. Police Chief Johnson took the podium, his voice firm but weary. "This is a tragedy that should never have happened. London Thomas was a young woman with dreams, with people who loved her. And tonight, we take the first step toward justice." Behind him, a photo of London appeared, bright, smiling, alive. The contrast was unbearable. In the crowd, London's mother watched in silence. Her face pale, her hands clutching a folded piece of paper. London's last school photo. When the press conference ended, she whispered just 4 words to the nearest reporter. She trusted the wrong people. If you've made it this far into London's story, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. It's more than just engagement. It tells YouTube that stories like London's deserve to be seen. Every click keeps her memory alive. Because justice isn't just what happens in a courtroom. It's what happens when people refuse to forget. By the time the trial of London Thomas's killers began, nearly a year had passed. The story had already spread across Michigan, across the country, even. For many, it wasn't just another case. It was a question that haunted parents everywhere. How could someone so young, so full of promise, end up betrayed by the people closest to her? The courthouse in Oakland County was packed that morning. Local news crews lined the steps, their cameras aimed toward the heavy glass doors. Inside, the air was cold and tense, like the moment before a storm breaks. When London's mother walked in, the courtroom fell silent. She wore black. Her eyes were fixed forward. Every step seemed heavier than the last. On her wrist, she wore London's bracelet, the same one found near the dumpster. A quiet symbol of a promise no mother should ever have to keep. Across the aisle sat the defendants, London's boyfriend and his mother. 2 figures that once represented familiarity and safety now looked small beneath the harsh fluorescent light. The boy stared down at the table. His mother sat rigid, avoiding every eye in the room. The prosecutor began with a line that silenced even the reporters. "This isn't the story of a stranger in the dark," he said. "It's the story of trust, broken, manipulated, and destroyed." He spoke of London's dreams, how she was planning to start college, how she wanted to study nursing, how she believed in helping people. And then he described the night of her death, the argument, the panic, the choices that followed. As evidence was shown, the courtroom lights dimmed slightly for the screen. Grainy footage appeared, the silver car pulling into the alley, headlights flashing, silhouettes moving. It wasn't gory. It was worse, quiet, deliberate, human. You could feel every heartbeat in the room. Then came the texts, the final messages London sent that night. Her last words to her friend, "I think this might be it for us," followed by silence. From the jury box, one woman quietly wiped away a tear. The defense tried to rewrite the story. They painted the boyfriend as confused, overwhelmed, a young man who made a mistake. They said his mother was scared and acting under pressure. But the evidence didn't care about sympathy. It spoke louder than excuses. The prosecution showed the full timeline, the deleted texts, the coordinated calls, the cleanup. Every digital breadcrumb led back to them. And when the mother's recorded interrogation was played, the moment she said, "I didn't know what else to do," the jurors leaned forward. Because everyone in that room knew what that meant. She had chosen silence over truth. She had chosen protection over justice. When London's best friend took the stand, the air grew thick. She described how London had confided in her, about feeling watched, about being controlled, about how she once said, "If anything ever happens to me, tell my mom I love her." It wasn't a prophecy. It was fear turned real. As testimony after testimony unfolded, the story took shape. Not a mystery anymore, but a tragedy built on control, lies, and desperation. And then, it was time for London's mother to speak. The courtroom went still. She took the stand, hands trembling, voice steady but fragile. She told the jury about London as a child, how she loved sunflowers, how she never left without saying, "I love you." She said she forgave the killers, but she could never understand them. And when the prosecutor asked what justice meant to her, she replied softly, "Justice is her name being remembered for how she lived, not how she was taken." The jury deliberated for 7 hours. Outside, rain began to fall. Steady, quiet, unrelenting. Reporters huddled beneath umbrellas, cameras waiting, the city holding its breath. When the doors finally opened and the jurors returned, no one moved. The judge asked for the verdict, and the foreperson stood, voice shaking slightly. Guilty on all counts. No cheers, no gasps, just a long, collective exhale. In the front row, London's mother closed her eyes. A single tear traced down her cheek, but she didn't cry out, because grief had already taken everything words couldn't. The boyfriend showed no emotion. His mother looked away, her face pale, hollow, as if she'd been waiting for this ending all along. The judge's voice was firm. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the gavel fell, it was more than just a sound. It was the end of one story, and the echo of 100 questions that would never be answered. Outside, the rain turned heavier, streaking across camera lenses. Reporters spoke quietly into microphones. People passing by stopped for just a second to watch, shake their heads, whisper, "How could they?" And then they moved on. Because that's what the world does, it moves on. But London's story wasn't done. Not for her family. Not for the detectives who carried her photo in their case files. Not for the thousands who followed the trial online, posting her picture with the hashtag Justice for London. In that courtroom, justice was served. But in the world outside it, her name became something more. A reminder of how quickly love can turn into danger, and how silence can destroy even the strongest hearts. If you've stayed with this story this long, thank you. You're part of what keeps these stories alive. Please like, share, and subscribe if you believe that telling these truths matters. Because every view, every comment, every click helps bring awareness. Not just for London, but for every victim whose voice was taken too soon. When the verdict was read, most people thought the story was over. The cameras packed up. The reporters moved on to the next headline. But for London's mother, the silence after the trial was the hardest part. Because justice in court didn't mean peace at home. For weeks, she couldn't walk past London's bedroom without pausing. The air still smelled faintly of her perfume, vanilla and coconut. Her textbooks were stacked neatly on the desk, a half-written essay still open in her handwriting. The last line read, "Sometimes, trust is the bravest thing we can give." That sentence became a haunting echo, one that no verdict could erase. News of the sentencing rippled through Detroit and beyond. People who had never met London left flowers and candles outside her high school. Some tied yellow ribbons around trees along her street. At night, the candles flickered like small, trembling stars. On social media, the hashtag Justice for London trended for days. True crime forums filled with her smiling photos. People shared her story not as gossip, but as a warning, a lesson, a prayer. One post read, "She could have been my daughter. She could have been me." Another, "The world failed her, but we can keep her name alive." Within weeks, a group of young women launched the London Project, a nonprofit that teaches teenagers about relationship safety and digital awareness. Her mother joined the first meeting, sitting quietly as survivors shared stories of control, fear, and escape. It was heartbreaking, but it was also healing. For the first time in months, she smiled. When several true crime channels reached out for documentary rights, London's family hesitated. They didn't want her memory turned into another sensational story. But eventually they agreed on one condition. Her story had to focus on why it happened, not just how it ended. So, a small production crew arrived in town. Quiet, respectful, determined to tell the truth. They interviewed friends, detectives, and community members. They even obtained hours of never-before-seen interrogation footage. During one interview, Detective Alvarez, the lead investigator, said something that stayed with viewers long after the credits rolled. People think monsters hide in the dark, but sometimes they sit across from you at dinner. When the documentary premiered online, it went viral. Within a week, it had millions of views. The comments poured in. Heartbreaking, inspiring, unforgettable. And then, as always, the internet did what it does best. It began to speculate. Amateur sleuths dissected every frame, every timeline. Some claimed there were more people involved. Others accused the police of covering something up. But amidst the noise, one truth remained. London's voice was finally heard. After the media attention faded, reality set in again. Grief is strange that way. It doesn't end when people stop talking about it. It lingers, reshapes, settles in small corners of your life. London's mother began volunteering at a local shelter for at-risk teens. She brought cookies, warm clothes, and sometimes just silence. When asked why she kept coming, she said softly, "Because someone has to remind them that being loved should never hurt." Detective Alvarez, too, carried the case with him. Every year, on the anniversary of London's death, he visited her gravesite and left a sunflower. He once told a journalist, "I've seen dozens of cases, but this one was personal." And it was, because for everyone who had touched the investigation, it wasn't just about solving a murder. It was about understanding how something so cruel could grow from something that once looked like love. As for the convicted pair, London's boyfriend and his mother, they faded into the background of prison walls. Their names were no longer trending, their faces forgotten, but in occasional letters to the court, both expressed remorse. The mother wrote, "I wish I had been the kind of mother who told the truth sooner." Her son's letter was shorter. "I can't undo what I did. I just want her family to know I think about her every day." London's mother never replied. She didn't hate them. She didn't forgive them either. She simply said, "Some words come too late." Months later, London's story became part of school safety workshops. Her name was mentioned in podcasts, university studies on digital abuse, and advocacy panels. People began talking more openly about emotional manipulation, coercive control, and the red flags we ignore. In a strange way, London had become a teacher, even in death. Her story wasn't just about tragedy. It was about awareness, resilience, and change. 1 year after the verdict, the city dedicated a mural in her honor. It was painted on a brick wall near her old school, a bright portrait of London surrounded by sunflowers. At the unveiling, hundreds gathered. Some cried, some prayed, and when her mother stepped forward to speak, her voice carried through the soft wind. "My daughter was not just a victim," she said. "She was light, and today that light still shines." The crowd applauded quietly. For a moment, the pain turned into purpose. Even today, years later, new viewers discover London's story. The comment sections still fill with empathy, outrage, and reflection. People say, "I can't believe this happened to someone so young. I wish she had known how loved she was. Thank you for telling her story with respect." Those comments matter, because for every person who watches, shares, or speaks London's name, another young person might recognize the warning signs in their own relationship. And that, in the quietest way, saves lives. She believed in helping others, and that's what we'll keep doing, in her name. For London, for every voice that wasn't heard in time. This story moved you, don't let it end here. Like, share, and subscribe to keep these stories alive. Every view helps bring attention to victims who deserve justice, and to families who deserve peace. There's a saying often whispered in courtrooms and true crime circles. Justice doesn't end with a verdict. It begins with what we do next. For most, London's story ended the moment the gavel fell. But for her community, and for thousands of young women across the country, it was only the beginning. Because what happened to London Thomas didn't just expose a crime. It exposed a culture of silence, of ignored warning signs, of people believing that nice can't be dangerous. And that realization, that quiet, devastating truth, changed everything. A year after London's death, her mother stood before a crowd at a candlelight vigil. She wasn't holding a speech. She was holding her daughter's diary, the one detectives found beneath her bed. It wasn't filled with secrets or fears. It was filled with dreams. Dreams about college, about writing a book, about traveling. As she read aloud from its pages, something shifted in the air. People didn't just cry, they acted. Within months, a local organization called the London Foundation was formed. Its mission was simple but powerful: to teach young people how to recognize toxic relationships before they turn dangerous. Schools across Michigan and Ohio began inviting volunteers to speak. They showed students London's photo, not to shock them, but to remind them, she looked just like you. She trusted, and trust shouldn't cost a life. The momentum didn't stop there. A group of lawmakers introduced the London Act, a bill focusing on early intervention in cases of relationship abuse and online grooming. It provided funding for awareness campaigns, digital education, and community training. When the bill passed unanimously, her mother was there in the front row. She wore London's favorite blue scarf. Reporters asked her how it felt to watch her daughter's name become law. She paused for a moment, then said softly, "I'd give anything not to need this law. But if it saves even one girl like London, then she didn't die for nothing." The London Act soon became a model for other states. Nonprofits began referencing it in workshops, advocacy campaigns, and documentaries. It became a national conversation not about fear, but about awareness. Detective Alvarez, the man who had chased London's case through every dead end, never stopped carrying her memory. Years after retirement, he joined a training program for young detectives. The first case study they analyzed wasn't a robbery or a homicide. It was London Thomas. He told every rookie investigator the same thing. You can't just collect evidence. You have to collect truth. And truth hides in the places no one wants to look. In one interview, Alvarez said he'd never forgotten a specific detail: the night he found London's final voicemail. Her voice had been calm, steady, polite, as if she still believed she'd be okay. He said that voicemail haunted him, but it also pushed him. It taught me that prevention is just as important as prosecution. That belief inspired a new police initiative, an early warning database that tracked domestic violence reports connected to minors. They called it Project London. Years after the initial release, the true crime documentary, The Murder of London Thomas, resurfaced on streaming platforms. It didn't just trend, it exploded. Millions watched, commented, and shared. But something different happened this time. Instead of just discussing the crime, viewers started fundraising for real-world change. True crime creators collaborated to support shelters and mental health organizations in London's name. Creators made videos sharing red flags in relationships, using the hashtag #LearnFromLondon. And then something remarkable occurred. Dozens of survivors began messaging the foundation. They said things like, "Your story helped me leave. Because of London, I saw the signs. I'm alive today because of what I learned." It wasn't a viral trend anymore. It was a chain reaction, a ripple of awareness traveling from one person to another, quietly saving lives. By the next anniversary of London's death, the world had changed in small but powerful ways. Her story had been included in a university ethics course. Her mural had become a field trip stop for high schoolers studying social justice. And every year, on her birthday, people across the city wore sunflowers, her favorite flower, to symbolize hope and rebirth. Her mother once said during an interview, "People ask how I move forward. I don't. I move with her, every day." And in a way, that's what everyone who hears her story does. They move with her, through awareness, through compassion, through the promise to speak up when silence feels easier. But legacies aren't easy. Behind every reform, every law, every story that saves someone, there's pain. There are sleepless nights, media exploitation, and strangers arguing online about your child's life. London's family faced that too. They endured the public's obsession, the critics who accused them of profiting from tragedy, the trolls who questioned every motive. But through it all, they stayed focused on one thing: purpose. Not revenge, not fame, just purpose. Because if London's story could help someone else survive, then maybe, just maybe, it meant something after all. London's mother was invited to speak at a national conference on violence prevention. The room was silent as she took the stage. She looked out at hundreds of faces: parents, students, advocates, officers, and she began with one sentence: "This is not a story about death. This is a story about listening." Then she told them about the signs London missed, the manipulation that looked like love, the way people said, "It's just teenage drama," when it was really danger. By the end, the room was in tears. When she finished, she held up a sunflower and said, "For the next girl, may she never ignore the voice that tells her to leave." The audience rose in a standing ovation. And just like that, London's name wasn't just part of a tragedy anymore. It was part of a movement. But her light didn't fade. It changed laws. It saved lives. And it continues to shine for every girl who learns to recognize her worth before it's too late. If you've followed this story to the end, thank you. By liking, sharing, and subscribing, you help these stories reach more people. And you keep the memory of victims like London alive. Because awareness saves lives. And silence helps no one.